Welcome to Human or Athlete. We're 10 weeks in, and no one better to bring in on the 10th episode than Ruben Sammut, former Chelsea and Sunderland and now Dulwich Hamlet player. Excited to have you on, bro.
No, I'm really excited to be on. So thanks for having me, and can't wait to crack on.
Brilliant. So we'll get stuck in if you could give kind of a brief story of your background and where you've been and what you've gone through for the listeners who don't know what you've been through.
Yeah, so I'm a football player at the moment. I've been at the Chelsea Academy from the age of 8 up until 21. During my time there, I had a loan spell at Falkirk in Scotland, and after being released at 21, signed for Sunderland for a season, and now playing at Dulwich Hamlet in the National League South.
Brilliant. What was what was the environment like at Chelsea, and especially kind of like the mentality amongst that?
I think the mentality there was probably as elite as you can get at that sort of age, particularly in the under 16s to 23 age groups. I think everyone's got that elite mentality and winning mentality, and you're in an environment with a lot of very talented players who are all wanting to learn, all wanting to develop, and all have that one goal of getting into the first team. And I guess a lot of people have that sort of opinion of Premier League academy players. They might see what they're like on social media, that kind of thing, having quite a flash lifestyle at a young age. But I guess my experience of being in the academy, that there was no one who was sort of a big time Charlie. It was everyone was on the same page and hardworking and humble, as a lot of people would say. And I think a lot of the players you're seeing in the first team now, the Reece James, Callum Hudson-Odois, Masons, Tammys, they were sort of that perfect example of very enthusiastic, very hardworking, and they're obviously reaping the rewards now.
What's your opinion kind of then of like the social media thing with Chelsea, the top players and even like as 23s players? What's kind of like your opinion on the flash lifestyle that is expected of a footballer, and how have you kind of dealt with that? Have you felt the need, not in like a natural way, like that's now your identity, now it's your ego?
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of see all that?
It's an interesting one because I've always been an introvert, so I've never been someone to sort of kind of flash my lifestyle on social media. I'm almost quite reserved. I maybe overthink at times, thinking what reaction could happen if I post a certain thing up. So I was always very safe. And I guess at Chelsea as well, they used to have countless workshops of saying how to behave on social media, because you don't want to give the wrong impressions, the dangers of what you can face on social media. But I guess for me, I never really had a problem with what someone wanted to post, because it obviously shows a side of their personality. Some people obviously like to sort of broadcast what they get up to, what they're doing on social media. And although it may be flash, I guess for some of them, they've earned it. They've done their hard work. They've made their sacrifices. And I guess it's good for them just to sort of express their successes how they want to. I've just never been a person to do it. And I think as the years have gone by, I think people are sort of clocked on to being more and more protective of what they do put on there, and trying not to get bad reactions. And I think everything that's being posted at the moment from players in the first team and stuff is all been okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, because there's so many different ways of seeing it, as that people are just showing off or whatever, and then people are like, well, I'm never gonna live up to that, I'm never gonna have the same as them, but then for them it's normal. So it's a really interesting conversation. You mentioned that you were like an introvert. How does that balance with obviously being in a very extroverted, very like alpha football environment that is all about, in a way, who can shout the loudest, who can make the biggest impact as a person?
Yeah, it's different because you obviously step onto the pitch, and it's a whole new world. You sort of come out your shell, come out yourself a bit. I think in terms of being in the change room, I was never one of the loudest ones. And even when I was captain of the under 23s, it was it was a good challenge for me. I mean, I was never, like I said, the loudest in the room, but it sort of forced me to being in that position. I had to lead by example and be a leader. And for me, I always thought I was a good leader on the pitch. I could always speak and communicate on the pitch. So no, that was a really good exercise for me, and I took a lot out of it. And I guess in terms of your preparation for games and stuff, a lot of players like being loud in the dressing room, having music blaring, but I was always one who sort of kept myself to myself, just got myself in the zone. I didn't need anyone else sort of needing to rile me up and get me going for the game. I could do that myself, and I think there's sort of the differences you see between players who are extrovert and introvert, especially the likes that need that sort of bollocking from the manager. I was very self-critical myself. I knew if I was having a bad game, and I think at Chelsea as well, they had very good player management and that kind of thing. They knew what players they had to push buttons for and which they didn't, who needed an arm around them and that kind of thing. So I guess in terms of personalities in football, I guess they're the different ways the different personalities see things.
Brilliant. No, it's I think what I was reading on recently is that the kind of most creative and the most kind of I wouldn't say like successful, but in terms of the impact they're having on the world, they would be is that they're the ones who can switch between being introverted and spending time and focused on themselves, and like you just said, being able to rely on yourself to put yourself in the zone. But when it comes down to it, and you need to be extroverted, like being a leader, like being a captain on the pitch, you can also create that, and that ability to switch between the two is one of like most brilliant traits in being able to be successful, which is a really interesting kind of concept.
Yeah.
Talking of ego and kind of like, again, for people who don't understand it, it's kind of how you see yourself, your self-identity, who you think you are. What was your ego kind of like at Chelsea? You know, there is a big thing about, you look at the Chelsea players or whatever the biggest clubs are, and you think, oh, like Mr. Big Bollocks, Mr. This, whatever. Look at them. How was your ego kind of like at Chelsea, and how has it evolved over the last kind of 2-3 years of this whirlwind you've been on?
I think for me, I was always very humble and down to earth, and I think a sort of a way I sort of kept myself grounded was I was in a group of very talented players, very successful players, and I almost sort of knew to myself and sort of accepted that I wasn't the most talented player there, and I thought what set me apart from the rest and what got me into those youth cups teams was the sort of non-negotiable side. I had a very good relationship with Joe Edwards at the time. He's working with the first team now, and he would turn around and say the same thing. He knew I wasn't the most talented player. There was the likes of Mason Mounts in the team, Callum Hudson-Odoi, and for me, he just said, what sets you apart, is the non-negotiables. You work hard, your attitude, professionalism, leadership, what you offer off the ball. And that always gave me that sort of self-belief and self-confidence. But at the same time, where I knew I wasn't the best player, I knew I always had to work hard, because if I wanted to sort of get to that level, then I was always, they always had a saying, it was train like you're number 2 to be number 1, that sort of thing. So you never believe you are the best player on the pitch, because then you start taking your foot off the gas. So for me, that was easy. I accepted I wasn't the best, and I thought to be the best, I need to work hard every day, and my intensity in training need to be perfect and every day sort of thing. But I guess that sort of acceptance of that and being humble has just sort of put me in a good position. So I went obviously up to Scotland in the Scottish Championship, and then I went to Sunderland, and even now I'm playing in the National League South. I've never taken that sort of attitude that I'm better than everyone else. I've always just had I'm sort of the second best, and I need to keep training and proving myself that I am the best there. So no, I guess having that kind of attitude has helped me a long way.
Yeah, that acceptance to create like humility is a brilliant kind of insight, and yeah, I love it. Like, acceptance creates humility is profound in a way for people kind of knowing that, okay, how do I get more humble, or how do I keep myself grounded and manage my ego? Is you accept what's around you, you look at it completely realistically, and then you can control what you can control, and that's all that you can focus on. I love it. How do you see yourself now as a player that can do more, that can, obviously you're working as a scout alongside playing, and how's that all come about for you?
I guess for me it was I've always had interests outside of football, and I think the academy manager at Chelsea, Neil Bath, he always encouraged that because he always used to say such a small percentage of you in the room at the time are going to make it into the first team, and that's almost like a wake up call, a reality check, if it were. And I took that away with me, and I thought I loved obviously being academic. I was very keen at school, loved going to school, and it got to a point where after full-time education at Chelsea, which was up to GCSE, you could carry on doing MBQ as part of your education, or you could maybe go into A levels. So as me and a handful of boys, Fikayo Tomori was one of them. We decided to do A levels, and I thought it was always good to have that behind me in case plan A, being a footballer, didn't go according to plan, and you always need something to fall back on. And I think going forward, I'd love to do a uni degree as well. I know there's open university courses, very flexible, part-time, so it'd be very doable, and I'd be able to fit it into my sort of schedule and stuff. So that's something I'd be looking forward to. But I guess having that sort of now knowing that football's not forever. I mean, you're lucky if you have a career up to 35, and unless you're sort of playing in the Premier League or the top 5 leagues, Championship, you're not really earning an income that's going to sort of sustain you for life after football. So for me, it was always sort of seeing where I was at. And at the time, I was at Sunderland playing in League One, and obviously now I'm in the National League South. So it's being realistic with yourself and accepting, like you said, again, is that I'm at a level now, I can't just be sort of focusing on football as much as football is my passion. Reality is, at the age I'm at, it's a very difficult climb to get back into the Premier League. So for me, it was sort of being proactive in the summer after becoming a free agent. And during the pandemic, it was very difficult to find a club. And sort of when I was hovering around the National League South, those sort of teams who aren't all full-time, it was a chance for me to think I can do something else now. And I've always had a passion for football, and I thought I'd always had good knowledge and sort of my experiences in football of the setbacks I've had to deal with going through the whole academy system, sort of seeing what it's like on the outside of the bubble. I'd be very useful in that sort of academy environment. So I reached out to Neil Bath, the academy manager at the time. And for me, he was brilliant in terms of player aftercare, which has been sort of talked about quite a lot recently. Chelsea's fantastic in that. And I guess he stayed in contact with me, and he said if there was an opportunity that was coming up, then he'd sort of be the first person to let me know. And then at the time, there was a sort of scouting role. They were sort of going to broaden their horizons and look into under 23 players across the lower leagues. So it enabled me to play while I'm playing in the lower leagues. I could be I knew the players in these divisions, and it sort of enables me to sort of scout players, and I'm at home watching games, 3 games a week, scouting these players across these lower leagues, and in hope for finding a player that's fit for Chelsea. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it all.
I love it. It's an incredible idea, and I love that you've kind of gone through it, and the initiative you've had to go out and take a role like that is brilliant. And I think in a way, a lot of people are going to see it the way I have, is just that it's incredibly humbling to have been released from Chelsea, but still say, their aftercare is brilliant, to stay in touch with everyone, and now in a way give back to them, and want to help them and give players them. I think that's an amazing perspective, and in a way very giving, very compassionate. And I think it shows that you don't harbor any bad feelings or whatever, and it's an incredible moving on thing. And I love to see that. It shows a lot of character, and it's very impressive.
Yeah, and I guess I'd been at Chelsea since I was 7, so it's been almost my whole life. It's my home away from home, and I guess the relationships I built there are for a lifetime. So no, it is really good.
Brilliant. So a big thing at the moment, which is very important, very talked about as in football, and then I think in general education as a society as a whole, is how people manage their mindsets, how people manage their lives, as mental health to performance to all these different things, because a big thing is that we're not educated how to do this, and it's mindsets and all this mental stuff is getting bigger and bigger as people are realizing how important it is. Firstly, kind of looking at it for you, how do you manage your mentality or mindset on the pitch?
I think if I was to go into sort of setbacks, and how I've dealt with setbacks in the past, the sort of first real setback I had in my career was when I went on loan to Falkirk. I guess the experience I had there, I was very excited. It was my first loan move. It was up into Scotland, and I've been sort of part of the Scotland youth teams up until the age of under 21s. So for me, it was a way of getting back in the setup there. And I guess being the first step into professional football, I was so itching, eager to get into professional, like the senior game. I've been in the under 23s team 2-3 years now. So going up there, loved it, loved the pre-season. Everything seemed like it was going well. Adjusting to a new environment up there, I sort of adjusted quite easily. There was another boy I used to live with, Denon Lewis, who's at Wildstone now, but we sort of became good friends, and we lived together for a bit, so that made it easier. But then as the season started, we lost 4 or 5 games on the bounce. The manager ended up getting sacked. We were quite a new team, so there was a lot of players that come in. I think we had 17, 18 sort of signings, so it was difficult for the team to gel. But new managers come in, and I guess that's the sort of first thing I had to then adapt, and sort of you're back at square one. You have to prove yourself to that manager. So for me, mentally, I always used to just make sure, no matter what was going on the pitch, how well I was performing, the non-negotiables, as I mentioned before, was priority, and I just made sure I outworked everyone, showed the best energy in training, was the hardest worker in training, and best player in training. So they were ways I dealt with it a little bit at first. And then I guess coming away from my loan at Falkirk, it was 6 months. I came back to Chelsea in January, and at the end of it, I only had 6 months left in my Chelsea contract, and we were in the relegation zone. Hadn't made as much of an impact as I had planned to. And then talks go towards you're not going to sort of be offered another contract, and then you need to start planning for the summer. And I guess for me then, I don't know really. It was obviously tough to digest, but it was a steady transition into that acceptance of knowing I'm not going to be at Chelsea anymore. I had that sort of 6 months before the summer to sort of get my head around it, but I adapted pretty well. And I guess it was just sort of my hunger to succeed at the time sort of overrided the initial pain of that sort of being told you're going to get released. And I guess it was, for me, that 6 months was just a time to get my head down and work hard and get that next move secured. And I'd gone on trial at Sunderland, and that went well. I just made sure, again, I was doing all the right things, the non-negotiables that I knew I was good at, that could help me get into a good place. And they luckily enough wanted to sign me. And then you're sort of back onto that excitement of starting a new adventure again. So it shows you how much of a roller coaster football is. When it's tough, I guess you've got to just sort of ensure you have a good support network around you. I have an amazing family and friends. Not everyone can have that, but I was lucky enough to have it. So even in times when I was in Scotland and I'd fly back down to England, a lot of my friends, it would never just be football talk. It was always a good distraction. We'd go out for food, that kind of thing. And the talk was never about how's football going. It was always just about other things. It was me sort of quizzing them about what's been going on back down in Maidstone, that sort of thing. So that was always a great distraction for me. And yeah, just having a family that supports you in everything you do, and they're always proud of you no matter what. Even if it's not going well, they're still going to tell you they're proud of you. That's for me how I was dealing with it at the time. Just a lot of phone calls as well to mum and dad. They probably had heard enough of my voice, but I'd phone them every day. So no, that was always what helped me.
I love it, and I love your openness. It's brilliant. How do you manage then the mentality and your mind kind of off the pitch? Is it always kind of focused on football, or like you just said about spending time with friends, not worrying about it? Do you also, make sure prioritize time where you're not focused on that?
Yeah, I think the balance is definitely key. I've got a girlfriend now, got my friends, so it's just sort of making sure your time's not always dedicated to football, because I think if you do that, you're not having a happy, balanced life. And happiness again is the key to that. And what makes you happy is seeing your friends, seeing your girlfriend, seeing your family, um, away from football as well, and not making football everything, because there is a life beyond football. So yeah, finding the time to balance it between what you love doing is what's probably going to help your performance on the pitch as well.
Yeah, I love it. You talked about this like kind of whirlwind of the last 2-3 years and all the transitions of coming out the Chelsea bubble to then having to find a club, and then this whole COVID thing has been crazy. How have you kind of managed this change in terms of like you have to take more responsibility for yourself now? There's not as much, I'd say again, you're probably a lot more outside of the comforting, and again, I don't know the Chelsea environment, but comforting Chelsea environment where most things I'm assuming are kind of done for you. Now, having to fend yourself, take responsibility, do it your own way. How has that been for you, and what have you learned?
It's a lot. I mean, from this experience, I guess your mind goes into sort of overtime a bit more. You're thinking about a lot more things. Almost feels a little bit more exhausting, because like you said, at Chelsea you'd go in for breakfast, you'd have your lunch there. All you got to do is worry about having your dinner, making sure you're in a training on time. Whereas now in this environment, I'm in like a car school to train in, so I've got to you sort that kind of stuff out. I'm worried about what I eat for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. You're not getting that all given to you. There's washing your kit. Also, obviously, the stuff I'm doing off the pitch, the work on days off and stuff. I'm doing this scouting. So I guess, you're having to do and think a lot more, and you're using a lot more of your energy. So that's been the biggest change. But I'm kind of enjoying it, because I'm someone who can't sit still. So it's been good. It's been good for me, sort of keeping my mind active, and having this much to do has sort of helped in this pandemic, where I've been lucky enough to be able to go into both my jobs. I'm not and still working, so I'm very grateful for that. And I guess that's what's keeping my mental health good, because I'm getting out of the house, playing football, and then I'm able to watch football, which I love watching. So I'm kind of in a lucky position at the moment.
Yeah, I love keeping your mind active is so important. And you also kind of mentioned like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I see a lot that you post a kind of lot of nutrition. How have you kind of taken responsibility for that, and how important is that for you?
Very important, especially when we were playing Saturday, Tuesdays, and the sort of schedule was getting more and more hectic as because we started late in October, as you know. So we were playing a lot of games, and then stuff with COVID as well. For me, sort of staying healthy and keeping my immune system healthy has always been something I love. I've had a passion in, and I guess it helps with. I've got a couple of friends who are sort of running a business at the moment, Well Easy, which is they're very into their nutrition and healthy snacking and that kind of thing. And I guess sort of having that sort of my friends there, that we've got the same sort of mindset and passion for it. So we bounce off each other, and what they're doing is amazing. And I guess for me, a lot of the time I was listening to podcasts, especially during the first lockdown, and got to know sort of the Turmeric Co. and that sort of thing. Got in touch with them, and they've been great as well. They've been able to send me sort of the turmeric shots, and just I've always had sort of a caring for what I put in my body, because your body's obviously a temple. So having those sort of friend influences and being able to get in touch with these companies, and they're helping me as well, it's been great.
Again, it seems like you're such a person that takes so much initiative, and is not afraid to kind of do it in your own way, and to step out and put yourself in these environments and these situations where you get the best out of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
With kind of looking, the perspective you have on everything, how do you kind of create this perspective, and what's so important to your perspective, if that makes sense?
Well, my perspective on
everything, everything.
I don't know really. I guess I get a lot of it probably from my brother, from what he's very academic. That's where I sort of got that sort of love for education and stuff. And he's obviously gone on to he's doing law at the moment, but he used to read all the time, and he's just literally a book of knowledge. And I guess that sort of drive he used to show at school, for me, I always used to look up to in that sense. And then I just kind of put that aspect of, it's just down, for me, it's just down to hard work. You're not going to get anything. The sort of what you get out of it is what you put into it. So for me, working hard, you're going to sort of get the rewards. And I guess my perspective on life in general is, you don't, everything's not given. You need to work for it. And sort of this whole being proactive and doing my due diligence and that kind of thing is just an example of that sort of work rate. I just want to make sure I'm giving myself the best opportunity possible. I'm not one to sort of slouch and just sit on my arse basically and let the world go by. I like to sort of be in control of what I'm doing, and being in control of my potential and what I could become.
Wow, yeah, that's very insightful stuff. Taking it to a really kind of deep level, and this is something that we're really trying to focus on in this podcast, is to look at what are you most afraid of with football, and as you just go into your future, kind of what are your fears?
I think in terms of football, I've sort of got away from my fears of that, because it was always a sort of a fear of failure, a fear of letting people down. But sort of this sort of year, I've obviously come to know what can come from the other side of football, and there's more to it. So I've kind of accepted that what happens in football happens in football. If I end up not making it, then I've sort of come to terms with thinking that's not everything. So the fears of that have gone completely, I'd say. And I guess for me, the biggest fears I always had was the fearing of failure. And that's almost given me that inner drive to sort of do well and be successful. And I sort of flipped that from almost football to what I'm now doing outside of football. I've been putting a lot of energy into that, because football for me now is just more of an escape and enjoyment. And although I'd love to make it to the Premier League at one point, I mean, no dream's ever too big, but I think being realistic and setting shorter term goals, and I think for me, just sort of being able to still play football and earn from football, and then also do what I'm doing outside, is probably the perfect goal for me at this time. I'd say.
Yeah, would you say how have you kind of let go of those fears of failure in football?
I think probably just what's happened this summer, really. I kind of had to adjust and get to grips with sort of letting my ego go a bit and letting these fears step aside, because at one point I didn't have a job at all. So it was, any opportunity after that was, I was just grateful for. So I guess having that sort of rock bottom of not having a job and seeing what it's like, you're sort of at the bottom of the hierarchy, you're working your way back up again. It sort of just let me lose all those fears and stuff completely. It was starting from scratch. I had nothing to lose. So everything I feared that I did have to lose, I got to that point and I was okay. And I knew it was only going to be better from this point onwards. So it was just more excitement than that sort of anxiety and fear.
Exactly, like you face them and you're still there standing, and like you can only go upwards from now. Yeah. And I think that's an incredible place to be, because you have that underdog mentality. In a way, you're unstoppable, and to look at that perspective of football's just enjoyment and you do what you love, I think is amazing, because in a way, and there's loads of people, talking about it at the moment, but it's combining that self-help, whatever, being present to approaching football, which are complete contrasting mental environments. Yeah. And what you realize is that when you're present and you're focused enjoyment, that's when you play your best. Exactly. And like, when you do what you love, and you're present, you're naturally going to get better at it because you're just focused on it. And then with that comes improvement. It comes with contracts. It comes with better clubs, and so on and so forth. It all will grow. And I think so many more people can kind of just need to slow it down and focus on enjoying it in that moment.
Mm-hmm. No, spot on.
With kind of everything you've gone through, and I've know I kind of already touched on this a little bit, but this whole process, even from such a young age at being at Chelsea into where you're at now, what would kind of be the biggest things that you've learned, and then what would kind of your advice be to anyone going through similar things or even starting their journey now?
I think the biggest things I've learned over the years is for me, the biggest thing for me anyway was listening to the coaches and sort of taking in every bit of information you got from them, because they're the sort of one person who's going to help you sort of reach your end goal and sort of develop you as a player. So I used to, that was always something my dad always told me to say: make sure you're making eye contact, make sure you're listening to every word they're saying, and do everything they're saying. And I guess it kind of got me that professionalism and attitude that I can take in everyday life now. So just sort of absorbing any knowledge from anyone who's there to help you, then that's the thing I would say do the most. And obviously enjoying everything you do. Setbacks, that like football's a roller coaster, so you're going to get these setbacks and you're going to get these highs and lows and that kind of thing. So never sort of lose sight of what makes you feel happy, because like you said, that's the best way you're going to get the best sort of football out of you. There could be opportunities that come which that may be better in terms of money, but where you want to be and where you're going to be most happy is where you're going to play your best football, and that's when you start seeing those rewards. So keeping happy, staying professional, listening to everything that's being told to you. I guess for me as well, it's just sort of the hard work and what you're putting into training, the non-negotiables, like I've said countless times this podcast, but that sort of hard work, willingness to run is what's going to separate you from the talent, because there's a lot of talented players, but hard work beats talent. When talent doesn't work hard, that's always a saying, and they have that written in the Chelsea Academy, and I've followed that a lot. So no, that's a big one for me as well.
Wow, yeah, no, that's brilliant. I think that's great advice for everyone listening. With everything you've just spoken about and everything you learned, what are you focusing on yourself in terms of to improve yourself to be the best Ruben you can possibly be? What are your kind of next steps as a person?
As a person, it's probably, even doing stuff like I'm doing now with you, I don't think I would have probably done this kind of thing a year or two ago. So sort of stepping out my comfort zone, being able to talk about my experiences and sort of try and give advice. That's definitely a stepping stone. Sort of reading more. My sort of line of work I'm doing now with the scouting, just sort of feeding off the players at the club who can just sort of teach me stuff, just gain any knowledge I can to sort of help me in that kind of field. And then football the same. There's a lot of players in my team who have had experience in the football leagues, and just sort of rubbing shoulders with them and sort of getting any bits of information I can get off them, questioning them, always sort of ask them questions day in day out at training, off the pitch, that kind of thing, because just expanding your knowledge is just going to help you in every way possible, really.
Oh, yeah, the curiosity and stuff. I love that. What, in terms of any book recommendations, I always kind of ask this question, if you've got any for the listeners out there, any ones you've been reading that you would kind of want people to, or you'd recommend?
And Middleton's latest book, yeah, that's a good one.
Is that the Fear Bubble one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I've read First Man In. I love that as well. I think he's got some kind of really cool little mental tools.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And so then kind of from that, there's little like next steps as a person. Where are your dreams kind of taking you next? Where do you want to pursue football? Where do you want to pursue off the pitch?
I think in terms of football, it's just sort of playing at the highest level I can at the moment as possible for as long as possible. So whether that's the level I'm at now, national leagues, sort of trying to do that. But I guess away from football, my aspirations at one point is just I'd love to be a sporting or technical director of a club at some stage.
Love it.
Yeah, doing the courses, getting the experience and that kind of thing, and then putting me in a position to hopefully do that one day that's a big goal of mine.
What goes into that? What's like all the kind of steps and why that?
I guess I've always thought of going into coaching as well. But I think at this stage now, I think I've been loving this sort of talent ID and scouting sort of stuff I'm doing. So it's going through the whole talent ID FA levels, so the level 1, level 2, level 3, up to level 5, which is when you can sort of become a technical director. And I guess along the way, just doing the scouting and meeting people in the industry and feeding off them, and I guess getting that sort of experience will hopefully get me in that stage where I can then say I can become a technical director of a club, because I'd just love to do that. It'd be amazing.
I love that. That's a new one for me. I love it. If you're ever a technical director at Chelsea, let me know.
Yeah.
And finally, we kind of end every single podcast with kind of the question: what makes you human? What makes you more than a footballer? What makes you more than an athlete?
It's a good question. I guess there's just more to me than sort of the Ruben, the footballer. There's my sort of interests outside of football, whether it be cooking, reading, spending time with my family, that kind of thing. Just all that stuff that takes me away from that elite sporting environment is what I'd probably define myself as human.
I love it. And is that important for you to kind of keep going into the future? Is that something that you're always going to keep by your side?
Yeah, definitely. Just having that balance of having your focus of what you're doing as an athlete, but having the ability to flip, and all you're thinking about is your family and that kind of thing is an important thing to have. Yeah.
Brilliant. I love it. Well, unless there's anything else to add, we'll end it there.
No, that's perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you guys for listening.